We hear a lot of perspectives on the Mankind podcast. Inclusion of a guest is not an endorsement of their views, and the opinions expressed here do not always represent the mission or values of the Mankind Project USA.
Looks like the rain has gone.
G'day and welcome to the Mankind Podcast, the show where men take off their masks. They get away from the media's magnifying glass and they get a chance to imperfectly get to know the man in the mirror. Now, have you ever asked yourself the question, what is my life's purpose? Only 5 words, yet there is so much weight to that question. I can tell you right now, I have asked myself that question probably 1,000 times in my life, whether in the midst of an existential crisis, whether it was on career day in high school where they expect teenagers to decide their path for the rest of their lives, whether that's been a relationship. It's a question that has come up a lot for me. And something that, guess what? I don't have the answer to. And now in my time sitting in men's groups all over the world, I've heard men from the age of 18 to the age of 80 bring up this exact same question, and sometimes in the form of, what am I doing with my life? Or this path I'm on right now just doesn't feel right. Now, you yourself right now might be asking yourself that same question. And so recently, I've been having this conversation with a lot of people. I've been on my own discovery, my own path to this question. And so I thought, you know what? I've got to know someone in my path that I've crossed paths with that does this or has the answer to this. Is there an answer to this? I don't know. So I thought, you know what? I remember a buddy of mine I met way back ago at a Tony Robbins Unleash the Power Within, rah, rah, jump up in the air, scream, shout, walk on fire, the ones. And I met a guy there named Amrit Sandhu. And there was something about his energy. Out of 2,000 people in that massive hall or whatever it was, there was something about him. We were all up in the clouds, jumping up and down, but this man, metaphorically, and energetically, had his feet on the ground, just grounded. And so I felt called to speak with him. And when I asked, and he was there with his wife, and I asked him to tell me more about himself, and he said, helping people find the answer to their purpose in life is what I do, and it's what I do best. And so in my arrogance and ego in the moment, I kind of wrote that off as a bit kind of fluffy, a bit woo-woo, life purpose, yeah, righto. But then through my friendship with Amrit, I have witnessed over the years the work that he's been doing, the testimonials that pop up on his page and in his podcast, the experts that he interfaces with and brings into his communities. We're talking Kerwin Ray, Michael Mead, Dave Asprey from Bulletproof Coffee, Gay Hendricks, one of my favorite authors on the planet, Charles Eisenstein from Sacred Economics, Dr. John DeMartini, Stephen Kotler from Stealing Fire. I mean, come on. And not only that, the man is mentored by Vishen Lakhiani, the founder of Mindvalley, and Eckhart Tolle himself. So suffice to say that let's take life purpose, pretty of a big weighty thing, and let's back it with Amrit's experience, his integration and embodiment of his teachings, and the people that he has backing him and his work. So if I haven't qualified him for this topic of awakening your life's purpose, then you can turn off the recording right now. However, if you yourself are looking to get a clearer understanding of your purpose in life, if you yourself are looking for tools to overcome a dark period, he's going to help you with his story in this recording. And if you are also interested in how mindfulness and breathwork can aid you in your journey, then you are going to love this interview with Inspired Evolution's founder, Amrit Sandhu. Enjoy. G'day guys, Brandon Clift here from the Mankind Project, and I'd like to welcome you to another episode of the Mankind Podcast, where we prove to you each and every week that truth and vulnerability equals power. And we do that by breaking the molds of modern manhood to prove to you that there is more than just one way to be a man. Now, when I think about manhood, I used to say masculinity, and I realized that wasn't the right phrase to use. But, as a young man growing up, when I think about manhood, I often think about kind of the the archetypes, the tales of the warrior. And of course, warriors get associated to, manhood, masculinity, swinging swords, and, being macho and brave. And of course, we know that the warrior energy isn't just restricted to the male gender. But when I think about the warrior in a lot of Jung's teachings and Gillette and Moore's teachings in their book, King, Warrior, Magician, Lover, I think of purpose. That, warriors in our stories and tales have, they've got to have a strong purpose for what they're fighting for and what they're charging towards. And so as I ponder these questions of purpose, I thought, why don't I just reach out to someone who pretty much does this for a living, and this is their purpose in life, helping people find theirs. So I invited Amrit to be on the show and sent him an email, and he sent me an emphatic yes. Mate, you're a busy guy. I'm grateful for you taking the time. Tell us a little bit about yourself, and we'll get stuck into it. My audio guy is going to kill you.
Was that peaking? It is such a pleasure to be here, brother. Thank you so much for having me. We've met in quite a few little, sporadically throughout our life at different junctures.
We've converged in very random kind of settings. It's been really cool.
Yeah, and it's always been remarkable. Every time I've dropped in with you, there's always been like a real brief but solid connection. So yeah, really, I think that speaks to just the presence that you hold and the weight that you carry with yourself as you do. And yeah, it's a real pleasure to be here with you today, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you for those kind words. Enough about me. Let's talk about you. So yeah, we met at a Tony Robbins event, and it was at a time that I was really, really kind of I was on struggle street. I had a very disjointed understanding of what success meant. Arguably, it was probably the most successful financially I've ever been. Business was going great, and I just felt so empty and just so disconnected. And I'm at this Unleash the Power Within. There's 2,000 people in the room, and I'm not connecting with any of it. Like none of it. It's just like vinegar to me. That the thought of even pursuing anything else on top of what was just occupying my mind, my soul, my heart was just too much. And I met you in the crowd, and you just had this grounding energy. It wasn't. It's like you were one of few people in my judgment that amidst all the energy, your feet were still on the ground, and that was refreshing for me. Someone, a Peter Pan like myself, who likes to live up in the clouds. So, mate, tell us a little bit of your backstory of how you've made it to now, because it definitely hasn't been a linear path.
Well, okay, just the wall, because I know the depth with which you come to that question with. So I sort of don't want to shortcut it. Normally when I give it to people, I sort of give the abbreviated version from one end or the other. But I'll take I'll take a few to 5 minutes just to explain kind of the journey and the narrative and what I've learned through that process. So I'll probably pre-phrase it so people get the punchline of the joke, which is not a joke. It was my life up front. So people often ask, what's one of the biggest things you've learned on the journey of the Inspired Evolution? 3 years now interviewing some of the most incredible people on the planet. And yeah, it's been a phenomenal journey. But one of the things I consistently learn, and this is, I'm going to say 90% of the time, and I'm just being conservative, it's probably 100% of the time. And I just invite those that are listening in to sort of tune in and see how this resonates for them. But I found that our biggest gifts are formed and shaped in the fire of our biggest challenges. Right? So our biggest challenges form our biggest gifts. And so sort of prefacing it with that, it was early university, where I was meant to be going to university, and I wasn't kicking as big a goals as I used to be when I was in my academic career. And basically it came to a point where I got kicked out of university, which was horrifying for Indian parents because they had this kid that was, graduated year 12, top of the science class, top of the maths class, and all of a sudden university's like, get out a couple of years later. And it wasn't easy at that time to basically land myself in front of a psychologist. As you can imagine, thinking about an adolescent kid who's probably been a type A personality for most of his life. Sitting in front of a psychologist. And she literally turned around and said, listening to your story and where you're at and how things are going, it's quite evident that you've been struggling with depression for about 6 years. And that was pretty much rock bottom. Now, that moment, I still remember it so clearly. She was wearing this white fluffy rabbit jumper, like this white fluffy fur jumper. And I was just, at the time I found her to be super fluffy as well. And, like when you're young and similar to background to you, like in and out of the gym a lot. And I was just like this real kind of moving towards more of a stoic mentality in life. And I was just like, dude, who are you to tell me? And she picked at this thread at the time. She said, you know what, despite you having gone through this challenge for 6 years, you're going to be okay. And when she said that, I was like, what? Like, how can you just say that? Like, some part of me was actually disgusted because I was just like, you know what? Like, on one hand, you've just acknowledged the 6 years of pain that I've just been walking around with. But at the same time, you're just like, oh, you're going to be all right in a month or two. It's just like you just disqualified everything that I'd gone through. And she said, you'll be okay because you know that something's wrong. Most people are walking around unaware that there is something going wrong. Like, yes, you've crashed and burned and hit rock bottom and that's landed you here. But the fact that you've hit rock bottom and you've acknowledged it and you're aware of it, the shift has already commenced and you're just part of that process. Now you just need to jump on board with the shift that's coming, or you can fight it and make it really messy for you. And in that moment, she basically pulled at this thread in my personality at the time, which basically unwove the whole tapestry of who I was. And she was like, you just need to embrace honesty. And as she said that, I was like, it was horrifying. The fact that I could spend 15 to 20 minutes with one person who was trained in this craft of, being a psychotherapist. And I was just like, what is going on here? Like, how did she just in 20 minutes, like, find the exact root thread of what was going on for me? Now, being a life coach, looking back, I realized I was living with two sets of values. I grew up in an immigrant family in a Western country, right? And my background, one of the values of the places where my family's from is you always put your best foot forward. No matter what the situation, you put your best foot forward, right? You can call it fronting. You can call it, living in a one-bedroom apartment while you drive around in a BMW 7 Series, whatever you want to call it, right? That's kind of putting your best foot forward, just so that when people interface with you, and I think that's just a function of, in these heavily populated countries, there's just so much competition, right? Like when you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like there's just so much competition, population. It's just a real struggle to get ahead. So you've kind of got to put your best foot forward, hoping that the best opportunity comes your way. But I grew up in a Western society, in a very different culture, where the values of the culture that I grew up in were much more, hey, like, just be transparent, just be honest with me, right? And I didn't know how to reconcile these two facts to the very point of, like, there were these massive things that I couldn't be honest with myself about, right? And I couldn't express myself truthfully. And the opposite of expression is depression, right? And so that was my depression, right? The key thing in there was, like, even the little things. So, like, you'd be like, Brandon would invite me along for dinner, and I'd be like, all right, cool, I'll be there at 6:30. And then you call me at 6:30, where are you? Oh, mate, I'm just 5 minutes away. And it'd be 6:45, and you're like, call me again. Where are you? Oh, I'm just 5 minutes away. I'll see you soon. And then at 7 o'clock, it's like, where are you? Oh, I'm just 5 minutes away. And then it's like 7:30 by the time I rock up. I'm an hour late. But every time you called, I said I was 5 minutes away. Now, when I rock up, you're so annoyed and agitated with me, right? But what I was doing was the disease of people pleasing. In the moment, I was just like, oh, I'll just placate him on the phone so he doesn't hate me on the phone right now. Right. So I was just trying to put my best foot forward. And that's like a small example. And, how we do the small things is how we do the big things. And that extrapolated out to every scale of the system. So I was dishonest just based as a function of different value sets. So I grew up with the value of just putting your best foot forward in a place where, that wasn't how you operate in the society. So now, if I'm going to be 15 minutes late, I'll tell you I'll be 20 to 25 minutes late, and I'll be there 5 minutes earlier than I told you I would be late. You know what I mean? Because then it's way more cleaner that way. And I've had to learn that through the journey of life in the process. But that was really where I broke down. So that was my biggest challenge. And in her infinite wisdom, my therapist basically handed me pills. And the doctor that prescribed me to the therapist, by some blessing and grace of God, again, this was one of the miracles in my life, she prescribed me a mindfulness meditation, a practice. And I remember at the time turning around and looking at my doctor that prescribed me breathing. Literally, one prescribed me pills and the other one prescribed me breathing. And I'm not a violent person, right? I'm not even close to being a violent person. But I remember turning around at that moment and just wanting to like headbutt the doctor, because I was just like, breathing? Like, are you serious? Breathing. Like this thing that I've been doing my whole life, you reckon breathing is going to be this thing? So anyway, went straight to the pharmacy, filled the prescription, went home, took my first pill. And it was amazing. I cleaned the house, was listening to music, getting so much shit done. It was incredible. And then about 4.5 hours later, 4 to 4.5 hours later, I started coming down. And at that point, I realized, this is like an upper. And I was going up, and then I started coming down. And then, every 6 hours, you meant to take another one. I was like, I remember looking at the box and looking at how dangerous it looked to me at that time, because it was like, am I going to spend my whole life on this roller coaster of taking a pill, going up, getting shit done, and then crashing down? And some part of my soul, like inner guidance, just knew that wasn't the way. So I literally just looked at the box, picked it up, put it in the bin, no lifeline, knowing that I was struggling with depression, but I just knew that was not the answer for me, and just went about my business. Now, one of the environments that really stoked a lot of anxiety in me was university at the time. So I remember walking down the university halls and I could feel for the first time like the walls closing in as I was walking. And by some grace of God, in the back of my phone, I had a clear cover at the time, and I had this breathing exercise written down in a Post-it note that was in the back of my phone. So I'm walking along and I've literally just gone, and I started to call someone. This was something that I didn't know was a crutch for me at the time. I used to just connect to people and just try and get away from my current life situation by talking to a friend. So I picked up my phone, and there was this breathing exercise written on the back of my phone. I just started going, okay, inhale 1, exhale 2, inhale 3, exhale 4, inhale 5, exhale 4, inhale 3, exhale 2, inhale 1, and just rinse and repeat. And I started doing that, and I shit you not, the walls, as you would have just experienced if you felt that and you're doing that along with me, the walls started to move out. And I was just like, what is this? And so I just started relying on this breathing exercise to get me through all the stuff that was coming up for me, all the lies that I had constituted that had basically led me to crashing into rock bottom, that had then evolved me into, hey, you're going to have to learn to be an honest person. That mindfulness brought me home. It caused me to make a massive shift in my life, getting real with that honesty. So mindfulness brought me to more awareness. That's what that breathing was all about, was being mindful. So I started unpacking that, realizing mindfulness, realizing awareness, and I realized there is so much that is wrong, including just that honesty. So that's when I had to shift. I basically left my home, despite everyone's advice, which was like, you've just realized you've got a mental illness. Don't leave your support network. Don't leave your family. But sometimes you kind of have these callings and you know a little bit more about yourself than other people do. And it was just like, I'm going to make a change, but I need a seismic change in environment to really change who I'm going to be, right? And now as a life coach, I understand identity a lot, and trying on, as you put it before, Bren, like different skins. So I needed a new environment to try on a different skin. So that's when I left for Queensland to basically move to Melbourne, to line myself up for to get my, to finish off my engineering degree and get a really awesome career in engineering. And that lines perfectly and segue into my second greatest challenge. So my first greatest challenge, if you missed it, was struggling with depression and mental health and illness for 6 years. And mindfulness and meditation basically reconstituted my life, is the way that I share that from stage. And that led me to becoming a meditation and a mindfulness teacher initially. And the second biggest challenge was when I continued on the journey, basically fulfilling the prophecy of the power of meditation, the guy that basically got kicked out of university then when he graduated from university, touch wood, I don't share this with you from a place of ego, but just to When I got awarded this award from university, they asked me why I should be deserving of it. And I said, look, I would use it to inspire others. So in that same vein, when I graduated university, I graduated top of not just engineering, but top of every single degree student cohort in that year at RMIT. And it was a phenomenal award. And I remember at the time just looking at myself and just going, wow, like, go from where to where, and that for me was a testament to the power of meditation and mindfulness for performance. And then from there, I got the most amazing opportunity in the world to basically work with an incredible construction company here in Melbourne. And I went along, basically to live the dream life as an engineer. And shock horror, years into that, I realized that actually this was not my calling. And that was my second biggest challenge, is living off of purpose. And that is now the work that I do, is realizing that actually no one really had the real conversation with me around what is it that your soul wants to do, not just what everybody that loves you and thinks is best for you wants to help you achieve. And everybody's, got your best interests at heart, but they're not you, right? You're a soul, you're a unique energetic signature that's put here on the earth. It's impossible for someone else to know exactly what's you and what's emerging out of you. And so for me, that was purpose. And that's kind of what's evolved into me becoming a life coach around purpose, leaving that, moving into life coaching and helping people activate their purpose. So that was my second biggest challenge, and hence why that's my greatest service. So the things that are your biggest challenges form your biggest gifts. Wow, that was a long response. Thanks for listening.
That's it's so interesting. Some of the most prolific people I've met in my life have come from some form of like engineering background or science background, which I just interviewed a dear friend, Ryan Tuckwood. He's he spent 8 years in engineering, and now he's got one of the world's largest sales coaching companies for selling with integrity and with honesty. And I said, what's the key to it? He said, human beings, it's people. He said, I thought engineering was going to provide all the answers, right? All the data and the figures, but the more I think, we learn the power of the gray area, that things just aren't black and white. It opens up more opportunities and possibilities when we can accept that. And having spoken to a lot of my my Indian friends in Australia and my Pakistani friends as well, they've told me interestingly about the experience of moving to Australia, being raised in a traditional Indian or Pakistani household, but being in a Western country, being with Western influences. They called it the coconut experience, right? Being brown on the outside, white on the inside, and there's all these conflicting, like the nature and nurture is very conflicting, right? Because there's these cultural expectations for you to uphold, which has, especially countries like India, where education is the ticket out for so many people. That's the pass out of a lot of, it's the holy grail, right? And to go against that, I'm curious, like just whether you answer this now or at some point during the interview, how have your parents reacted to the shift, like to move from the cushy engineering job into this superfluous world of life coaching?
So let's have this conversation. Yeah. So at its core, like I'll be the first to sort of jump up, and in our culture as Indians, we literally touch our parents' feet, like as we do sort of touch the base, like the feet of the temple when we go into it. Our parents are like to be worshipped in many ways. They give you life, right? They look after you, like your mother breastfed you, they teach you how to walk, they teach you how to form words. And I say that because especially when you start realizing so much around when you start going into personal development, you start realizing a lot of things that, kind of irk your personality were settled in on an early stage as a young kid, but your parents were just doing the best they could early on, right? So letting them off the hook, because the longer you keep them on the hook, the more you alienate your ability to take charge, right? You don't have any ownership, so you can't change if you don't have the ownership.
The power's in their hands.
Right?
Yeah.
So you got to bring that home, right? So they did the best they could. Thank you so much for the opportunity you gave me. Which bleeds into what I really wanted to say to answer your question, is the opportunity they gave me, right? So from their paradigm and their cultural experience and the life that they lived, They went out of their way to give me the best opportunity that life could afford. And they absolutely did it, man. Immigrant parents sent me to a private school that cost a lot of money. They put in a lot of hard yards to get me to where I needed to go. And now that I'm here, I remember having this conversation with my dad as soon as I graduated university. I was like, "So, Dad, I can get an engineering design job for 60 or 65K a year, and I can get a construction manager's job for 90K a year." And he goes, "All right, cool. So you're going to be a construction manager?" And I was like, "Well, I'm not sure, because the 90K a year involves me working up to about 60 to 70 hours a week, and I only earn about $28 an hour." And he goes, "So?" And I'm like, "Well, the design engineering job, makes me about $38 to $40 an hour, but I make less overall throughout the year." And he goes, "So you're going to be a construction manager?" And I was just like, "Are you not listening to what I'm saying?" And I make more per hour as opposed to, getting more as a lump sum at the end. And he's just like, and he couldn't compute. For him, it did not matter that I was getting paid more quality of life per hour over here. The fact that someone was willing to fork out 90K from their budget to put it into my pocket was like, that's where you got to go, because of where he came from. That was the opportunity. That was the land that he's from. And that's the land of opportunity that he saw for his kid. And that's what he was trying to afford me, right? Mm. But the reality is, I'm the person that he afforded the opportunity to. I'm the person my mother afforded that opportunity to. In this space, they have no direct experience of what that opportunity actually feels like. It's on me to carve that out and feel actually the blessings of this opportunity. And that legitimately looks like, for me, this, like life coaching, public speaking, podcasting, right? Now, for them, they can't wrap their heads around it. Why? Well, there are things like, a Facebook marketing consultant wasn't a career 10 years ago when they were sending me to university, right? So there are things like society is evolving. And one of the people I've interviewed is Stephen Kotler, and he talks about, just how rapidly the future is changing. Where the world's going to be 5 years from now is unparalleled. Do you know what I mean? And then compounding that investment in terms of the technological, we're reaching an asymptote, 2027, God knows what's going to happen then. But nonetheless, life is evolving at a really rapid pace. So I think that's kind of the key thing to answer your question there is, yes, my parents afforded me the best opportunity. And in that space, instead of just taking on the opportunity that afforded me and feel leveraged and compelled and sort of say, I've got to make the most of this opportunity, is realizing, holy shit, they also empowered me. Right. So from this place of empowerment, what do I make of this opportunity that is, and yes, I'm going to make some wrong decisions. And yes, I'm going to make some great decisions, but those are going to be my decisions. And that's going to be my life that I get to choose how to live and how to map that out. Again, loving them wholly and solely, keeping them as informed as much as on the process. And sometimes they're completely on board with me. Sometimes they're like, what you're doing is the shit. Like, you're doing God's work. Keep going. Yeah. And then sometimes they're just like, what are you doing? So I get everything, man. I get everything. And if I'm honest with you, sometimes it's, just when I need a little bit of support, somehow energetically they're there with support. And sometimes when I'm really grounded and really solid, that's when they start poking holes, and it's like, nah, I got you. Right. So that's my response.
It's the illusion of ascension, right? When we get to that point where we're like, oh man, I am so zen right now. I got my feet in the dirt, and all it takes is someone close to us to just stick that knife in just a little bit, and well, it all falls apart. Let's start talking about purpose, because purpose is one of those things that I think is so confusing to grasp. We hear it from successful people all the time, right? You got to find your purpose in life, And speaking to some of the people I've spoken to, I hear very differing opinions on purpose. Some say purpose is the thing that, is going to be like the when you're standing at the pearly gates, it's going to be the end result of your time on earth. Other people say purpose is, your purpose could just be for now. It could be for this thing. It doesn't have to be a passion. And other people say, no, your purpose has to be your passion. And if you join my course, you're going to be able to make money, live on a beach in Bali with your laptop out, if you combine your purpose and passion and in drop shipping.
But where's your passion? Drop shipping.
So So give me a bird's eye view of what you believe. Just explain purpose, because it is confusing to kind of come to a consensus of what it actually means and how we can find it for ourselves.
Alrighty. So again, people are just going to think I'm one really deep individual here, touch on it, but just honoring the space that you hold, Brendan. I fundamentally believe that we are the universe looking in on ourselves. Yeah, and that's, if you can get on board with that, from there, like that piece of, wisdom, wherever it comes from there we can really start to unpack. So we are all these lenses of the universe looking in on itself, right? Like literally, like I'm looking in at the universe this way, you're looking in this way. Everybody, no one person is superfluous to the grand design of everything. These 7.6 billion people walking around the planet are facilitating the curiosity that life itself has, right? For trying to recognize itself. It's like, who am I? Why does this question plague philosophers? Why? Because that's what life in itself is doing. It's trying to look in on itself and figure out who it is, right? And potentially it may not, right? But there is the majesty and the mystery all wrapped into one, right? That's the experience of life. So your purpose is fundamentally what I believe, you just keeping that lens as clear and as clean as possible to be who you are meant to be as the universe puts you here to look in on life in that certain way, right? So for me, you feel like it's this conversation around purpose, the reason we're here, what are we doing, what does health really mean, what are our values, like this sort of stuff is like, I can talk to you about this for like, and you said this before we jumped on, I could probably talk to you for 10 hours. It's like, legitimately, I could talk to you for 10 hours on this, more, right? The podcast has been going for years. I will continuously talk about this. Why? Because that's the lens that the universe, I'm that lens from the universe looking in on it from that perspective. Now, I think the biggest challenge we run into is everybody is trying to be the red Ferrari, white picket fence, big mansion person, right? That lens is a particular lens that the universe is looking in on itself, right? But then there are so many other lenses. There's the van life guy with his surfboard, right? There's the person meditating in the Himalayas, right? There's the person that's running an epic business in India, helping, people that can't afford to basically afford their own clothes and helping them trying to, these conscious startups basically that are happening in so many third world countries now. So there are so many different lenses to look in on the universe. Swim in your lane. Right? Uncover what is your truth. Remember who you really are. Now, the question then becomes, how do I find my purpose? Which is what you were saying. And that was the original question. I subscribe to what you said before, which is, hey, what is it that lights you up? Like, what is it that legitimately feels easy for you? Like these conversations, they feel generally easy for me. I know for you doing them for the Mankind Project, like you do them because they're kind of effortless. Like, yes, it takes time and energy to show up, research a guest, and be a part of it, but it's relatively flowing. It's relatively straightforward, right? And this is where that conversation of flow is a profound and sacred one. You don't just drop into flow willy-nilly, right? Like you drop into flow because the universe, the energy of the universe is legitimately seeing itself through you, through the lens that it wanted you to look in on itself from, with, as to, right? So that's how you drop into that flow. That's where that bigger energy comes through you, right? So that's flow states. That's what I believe is happening. And so where do you find that natural grace, that natural flow? Where does it come up? For me, it's conversation, right? So that's hence the coaching, one-on-one, one-to-many. As long as I'm speaking, we're in a good state. We're in a good flow. Speaking from stage, coaching one-on-one. For some people, it's art. For some people, it's helping other people with their business, right? It could be anything. It could be absolutely anything. And in fact, it is absolutely anything. And that's where it's such a conundrum, because no two people's purpose will be the same, right? Because none of us are superfluous to the grand design. We're all different lenses looking into the universe. So it's so hard to homogenize, hey, this is how you find your purpose. You're you and I'm me, right? But we are connected to the universe as one direct experience of the universe experiencing itself. So find the thing that lights you up. Find the thing that brings you that inner ease, that inner grace, but also like brings you joy. Like joy is not coincidental. I spent 6 months working with Eckhart Tolle directly, and he said one of the key places that you find your purpose is enthusiasm. Things that you're enthusiastic about, that doesn't just happen by itself. You think it's your enthusiasm. Bullshit. Enthusiasm literally means to bring spirit into. So spirit is in your body, right? So you're animated by great spirit. You're animated by life itself, right? So the things you're enthusiastic about, you can't fake. Like I used to say this about relationships as well when I was always looking for a girlfriend. I was like, I always used to look at what they used to laugh at. Because I was like, you can't fake your humor. You can't fake what brings you alive. You can't fake, your joy. And it's the same thing with your life. You can't fake what makes you happy, but you suppress it a lot. Most people, we spend so much time suppressing it, but don't. If you don't, you know what that is. What are you randomly YouTubing all the time? How to fix hot rod cars? Maybe that's what you're meant to be doing. Are you always reading personal development books? Maybe you're meant to be supporting someone in the personal development space. Maybe you're meant to be a coach. Maybe you're meant to be a speaker. There's so many different things. What is in your space? Like you come to my house, you'll just see books on personal development, spirituality, faith, and you'll see musical instruments everywhere. It's kind of aligned to what brings me alive, right? Now I've just got to give myself permission and believe that I can create a life around that. Now that's a whole separate piece. But your passions, as long as you can cultivate your passions, keep doing that, keep doing that. Eventually, someone will turn around and say, hey, can I pay you for the thing that, you love doing? And you're like, holy shit, sure. From there, you've activated a purpose because now you're coming into service. And if you can live a life of service, man, you've unlocked it. Like that's the greatest hack for spiritual living is if you can live a life of service. So cultivate your passions. Then when you finally start serving with your passions, that's your purpose.
Well,
too deep. Keep it simple, Everett. All right.
No such thing as too deep.
I didn't think so.
Here, but definitely there's a million questions that come up with that, and I think that also speaks to that, in my efforts to understand something, I always try and put it in a framework, or I always try and put it under a microscope to where I go, okay, well, how can I make this innately gray area black and white? And I think from hearing your answer, it is. I'm now coming to the conclusion that when it comes to something like purpose, is it can't really be put in a box, right? It can't really be contained in a sense, because from what I gathered from what you shared is that purpose in many ways is just swimming in your lane. They're not actions. It's a state of being, not a state of doing. That the purpose comes in.
In some way, it is. You are the box. That is your purpose, right? Okay. In many ways, you are that lens, and
so you're making the rules essentially.
Basically, right? And the issue with that is as long as you're making the rules, most people make the rules for you. Society makes the rules for you. We go to a schooling system that basically encourages us to become factory workers. That's where school came from. Mm-hmm. But if you're not meant to work in a factory, that's not your purpose. What the fuck have you just spent 12 years doing, 13 years doing?
Sure.
So all these layers that drop in subsequently on top of us, right? As long as you're learning what you want to learn.
If you're enjoying the Mankind podcast, how about taking another step? This one takes some courage, and you've got it. Check out the Men's Work Introduction. It's 3 sessions over 3 weeks. New sessions start every month, and we even have a cohort tailored to LGBTQ men, which you can learn more about at bit.ly/menswork2.
That's what I've been finding as I have this conversation with more and more people. My business partner, Taylor Wilkins, he has an interesting take on purpose. That purpose in a way, we can have it as a way to serve a purpose, right? Mm-hmm. For example, I may not, and someone may not love a job that they're in, right? Mm-hmm. But it serves a purpose, a greater purpose, whether for them in that phase of life, it's about making sure that their kids have the greatest opportunities possible as they're growing up, or it affords them a lifestyle that they really love. Like things can serve a purpose. His take, but it seems like when you talk about purpose, you talk about it in a more kind of all-encompassing way. Is it just a matter of it's up to the user for how they look at it?
Cool. So one of the great love that. Thanks, bro. So one of the places in there is key thing that I always do with every single coaching client, whether you can't run away from this if you're going to work with me, it's find out your values. So the first 3 things, like your top 3 values. So for me, it's connection, contribution, celebration. Now I can talk about them for hours. We'll just park that for a second just so you know what my values are. Now, the person that is serving a purpose to facilitate a paycheck, to put food in his baby's mouths, right? That person may not be living out what you would see as their passion as like, okay, well, but he really loves, I'm just go with the hot rod car person. He loves hot rod cars and he's not, creating, $100,000 like repairs on these epic old cars and, like just spending time buffing out metal, the things that he loves doing, but he's not doing that. He's, instead, working at the car wash, right? Why is he doing that? Well, one of his highest values must be family, right? And he hasn't had the conversation around, okay, how do I activate, what it is my passions in terms of living a lifestyle? Because at the moment he's just in kind of what is commonly known as the rat race. He's the hamster on the wheel. So if you're in touch with your values, you'll start to understand why you make certain decisions, right? So one of his values is family. So yes, he is serving a purpose for his family, which is one of his key values, right? Now, the second value may be, could be anything, could be joy, right? But probably isn't, yeah? He hasn't placed a value on joy. He hasn't placed a value on freedom, right? He's placed a value on family. So he's doing things for his family and subsequently potentially not fulfilling what it means for him truthfully to be feeling the most alive. But notice, because he's prioritizing value as a value, right? He is actually playing out the universe's story of him being that person because he's just chosen that that's the value that I'm going to make my highest value, whether he's consciously chosen it or not, right? So now he's playing out the purpose of being the breadwinner. That's the purpose, and that's what you're alluding to. He's serving a purpose. So yes, in that way, you do sort of fall into whatever your purpose is. At no point is your purpose not playing through you, but you can actually tap into what is the greatest calling for you, if you want to put it that way, by really getting in tune is what is it really that's emerging from me rather than what society wants from me. It may be for this person that, he never really thought about having a family, but it's just what everybody in his family did before him, right? And now he's got a family, right? So now he's just doing what his forefathers and forefathers before that did before him.
It's his reality, right? That's the walls, that the conditioning is kind of set up, right?
Yeah. So where did those values come from?
So in a way, you're almost suggesting, let's just say the nurse that works nights and has a lot of time put towards a work environment that can be very tiring, very exhausting, but she has a dream of being a scuba diving instructor and things like that, but hasn't been near the ocean. Is the kind of advice there just, hey, go put your feet in the water? Let's start there. Or is it quit your job and go become a scuba diving instructor?
I'm a big believer in monkey roping. That was introduced to me by Tim Ferriss. So basically, as you're holding onto one vine, grab onto the next one before you let go of the old one.
Sure.
So yeah, go put your feet in the water. Go put your feet to some fire. Go put your, go to the top of a mountain. Like try a whole bunch of different things, right? There's so much, like all the things that satisfy your own innate curiosity. It may sound like, where do I even begin to start? The things that you've always wanted to do.
Yeah.
Right. Like some part of,
right.
Yeah. Totally. Yeah. When you're a kid, even as when you're an adult, like I didn't know that there was inspirational speakers when I was a kid, but when I kind of grew up, I was going along to these like events and these people inspired the shit out of me. People that were sharing like these little nuggets of wisdom that would completely change my outlook and my perspective on life. And I was just like, man, like I'd love to serve people in that way. Like it would be such a gift. And, I like worked at myself for ages. And then eventually it just sort of happened with, again, following the passion of the conversations around the Inspired Evolution, people started saying, hey, would you come and speak here? And it's like, yeah, like I would love to. Right. So you don't have to start big, start small. Like for me, it was just conversations on a podcast. Actually, to give you a full idea of how this started was before the podcast existed, some part of me just invited people over to my home every fortnight. I got really conscious that I was going to be the average of the 5 people I spend my time with. So I basically invited these people along and I said, you know what, this person inspires me, this person inspires me, these 5 people really inspire me. And I invite you to come along, hang out at my house every fortnight. I'll brew chai. So it was basically a chai chats in community. And we'd shoot the shit on spirituality, philosophy, personal development, and, just hang out in my living room and have a chat. And if we didn't have anything to chat about, I'll put on a TED talk and we'll discuss it. And that was called Mandala Moments. And basically people just coming over every fortnight and me just chatting to people. And people loved it. It was bizarre. Like, I didn't realize that there was no real consistent place for people to catch up that wasn't a bar. And people wanted to really hang out and just have chai and chats and hang out with, like, soulful people, touch wood. And I thought that was like, I didn't think about like, who's my avatar, how am I setting up a business, any of that. It was just like, this is what I really want to do, is just hang out with my friends. Then my friends turned around to me and said, start a podcast. And I was like, oh, yuck. I was like, not going to do a podcast. Like, it was just not my vibe, not my frequency. And then they kept pushing. And then a mentor appeared saying, hey, let me help you into a podcast. And I realized I was the resistance piece. My ego of what it thought about the podcasting was like, it was like, you know what, like, I'm a student, not a teacher. And I was like, you know what, just shut up and just try and see where it goes. So I removed myself as a resistance piece and just said, you know what, what's the worst that'll happen? I'll set up a podcast and see where it goes. And then I started podcasting. And then from there, people that were listening in were like, hey, can you coach me? And I was like, sure, absolutely, I'd love to. And then from there, it was like, hey, would you come speak here? Would you come speak here? We'll pay you to come speak here. I was like, oh, absolutely. Like, I'll do that, So that's like, it started with me just wanting to have chats with my friends about real shit in my living room. And that has just evolved into what you see now. So it doesn't have to be massive. Start super slow, super humble, but give yourself permission and time. Like, I give myself 10 years for this thing to become a success. And we're 3 years in now. So let's just see where it goes. Touch wood.
Yeah. So that was those Mandala moments were essentially, that was you putting your feet in the water and just changing the environment, getting a taste for it, rather than trying to eat the whole hog.
I didn't even know what the hog was back then. I was just like, this is what I enjoy doing. Like, I just want to hang out. Yeah, totally. Yeah. And just follow what feels good.
One of the unique lenses that I get to view from being in this position, being the interviewer, is how frequently I get. It's almost like I just get like weekly access to get shrinked by someone. Like, I feel very, very grateful and for this space and this opportunity to have these conversations. And I can't get out of my head. Like, I'm curious, if you're willing, I'm curious to look a little bit more in kind of your methodology and kind of those initial conversations you have with people. And who knows, maybe someone listening, it might be enough for them to jump on the website and shoot you an email and apply for a call. But around values, do you mind if we simulate that conversation for a little bit? I'm just curious to see where we might go with it.
Yeah, for sure. All right, cool. Let's do the values call straight up.
Sure.
So usually what I would be doing is, and I'll make this so that people can play along at home. So normally what I do is I'll send you a link with a Google Drive, link to a Word sheet, a Google Doc. And in there, there's literally a list. I think there's about 300 to 600 words written in there, right? So the easiest way for you to do this at home is to open up a new tab on Google and just type in list of values exercise. I'm literally doing this with you to see what comes up, right? So the first thing that comes up is 10-minute exercise to increase your value. Mind tools. So I've already found something at Taproot. There's already like 20, 30, there's probably 100 words on this page, right? Go to another one. Yeah, and this one has another. So I'm at mindtools.com. And again, there's at least 100 words on this page, right? So just look at all these words and pick the ones that jump out at you. You're going to need a few colored pens, right? So as I'm going through this page, I'll quickly run you through it. So accountability doesn't speak to me. Accuracy doesn't speak to me. Achievement, sort of. Adventurousness, yes. Circle that one. That one's one for me. Altruism, ambition, assertiveness, yep, speaks to me. Balance speaks to me. Being the best speaks to me. Belonging speaks to me. Boldness speaks to me. Calmness. So the ones that speak to me, I will circle. Right, so go through with a red pen and circle all the ones that jump out at you, all of them. Don't think there's too many. If you highlight 90 of 100, you're good. Don't worry about it. You probably highlight about anywhere. I've done this enough times now to know about, a quarter to a third is generally what you would do, right? So just go through and highlight them as a first pass.
Good thing I've done my homework. I've come pretty
Once you've highlighted them, go through the list of the stuff that you've highlighted. So you've got a shorter list now of everything that you've highlighted. You might want to write it out again or just look at the ones you've highlighted and come along with another few sets of colors, right? So let's just go through the ones that we did before, right? So, adventurousness spoke to me, and balance spoke to me, being the best spoke to me, belonging spoke to me, and boldness spoke to me, right? So that was just quickly how we did it. So I would highlight boldness and adventurousness as the same color, right? Because to me, they mean the same thing,
Sure.
right? Now, being careful, not what people think it means. So just to give you a quick little tangent here, my values, connection, contribution, celebration. What celebration means to me is not what it means to you. And I know that because I've done this enough times now.
Sure.
Celebration to me means vitality. I can't celebrate life unless I'm the most vibrant version of myself. And actually that means health to me. Now, for most people, celebration does not mean health. Yeah. But for me, celebration means health and vitality and purpose. Yeah. So what it means to you. So again, not going, adventurousness and boldness belong together. Adventurousness and boldness legitimately mean the same. Adventurousness and balance may mean the same thing to you.
It's an umbrella. Right? Like it just forms under the umbrella.
Totally, right? So then you form a few of these umbrellas, right?
Okay.
And many of these will collect, and then you'll end up with probably anywhere from 5 to 10 umbrellas, right? Once you've got those umbrellas, so let's say, for example, that adventurousness and boldness one, pick one of the words from within that umbrella to label the umbrella. Yeah, so it's like, you know what? It's about adventurousness, it's about boldness, but actually it's about courage. That's what I really value. I really just want to be a courageous human being. Yeah. So that umbrella is now called courage. Yeah. So then you've got 5 or 6 umbrellas: balance, taking action, courage, you might have joy. Sure. You may have 5 or 6. Those are your list of values, right? You've got your top 6 to 10 values literally written out now. Yeah. Those are things that from within you speak to you, right? Super simple, super, super simple. Now, where the rubber hits the road. Yes, you've got these. Now I invite you to write them in a note on your phone. Yeah. Just get out a notes pad, put a list, and if you can, when you're putting them into your phone, put them in order of that you think they speak to you the most, right? So it may be, courage is probably number 1, balance is number 2, family is number 3, so on and so forth. And generally what I do is I leave a gap between the top 3 and the remaining ones. Now, I invite you to walk around with your values in your pocket for the next 6 months. It's a bit of a time, but I invite you to do this. Now, what will happen is, and I'll give you the easiest example. So, me and my wife met this person and he was being a douche, right? He was actually not being a good person at all. And she turned around to me and said, why didn't you tell him he was being a dick? And I was just like, it's not for me to say to him. And she's like, yes, it is. If someone's being like that, they need to know that it's not acceptable for them to be like that. I thought you valued honesty. And I was like, I do value honesty, but I can feel that, she mentioned that. It's like, you valued honesty. And I was like, okay. So then I go away and I look at my list of values and I go, what's going on here? Why did I not tell this person honestly what I thought about them? And I was like, integrity is on my list of values. And at the moment it's sitting on top of connection. But I've just learned that connection I value higher than integrity. And the reality was that, hey, I didn't want to disrupt the connection between this person, even though integrity mattered to me. It was just like, you know what, if this is how you're going to be as a human being, I'm sure there's going to be other speed breakers in your life and you're probably going to hit a wall pretty fast. I don't have to be the wall. Why? Because my value is connection, right? Her value, my wife's number 1 value is integrity. So she's looking at it from her lens. She's going, hey,
sure.
So now in your day-to-day life, you've got this dojo in your phone where these values start to go move up, move down, move around, right? So from there, it's like, and over time, certain ones start to fizzle and settle in certain places. I value wisdom like nobody's business, right? I value it so highly, yeah? But it doesn't make my top 3, yeah? My top 3 values are connection, contribution, and celebration. There's wisdom in there. There's health in there. Yeah. There's so many things in there, being organized is in there, right? So there's all these things that are in there and they're still in my top 10, but I've known my top 3 values. Now, why is this important? So Brandon comes on and goes, hey, do you want to, like, literally it was an emphatic yes. He said at the beginning of this episode, when he wants to have me on the show, it's like an emphatic yes. So Brandon goes, dude, do you want to do this, do this thing with the Mankind Project? It'll be heaps of fun. It'll be you and me shooting the shit in a chat. Let's do it. And all I have to do is go, do I get to connect with people? Yes. Mm-hmm. Do I get to contribute to people? Yes. Are people going to subsequently celebrate more of life, hopefully, through some of the stuff that I've contributed to them and connected to them to? Yes. Bang! Absolutely. Let's do this, right? So it's like, formula. It's a no-brainer, right? Yeah. So like my values, your values are not labels to who you are, but they are the pillars of the temple that you are, and the energy flows through there, right? So those pillars, knowing that this is what my temple's about, is just so easy. It's like, all right, yep, Brendan's just, sending a current through. Let's go do it. I'm going to surf that current for the day. Boom, we're in, right? So decision-making is so easy. Learning to say no to opportunities, right? Like when we go, oh, actually, that doesn't help me connect. It doesn't help me contribute. It's not really a celebration, right? So like, let's be honest, I could celebrate by going to Ibiza and having a great time by myself. Am I connecting? Not really to the people that I want to. Am I contributing to anyone? No, right? Am I celebrating life by, having a pixie of a time? Sure. But does it really live up to my highest values? No, right? So you get to basically say no to certain things and yes to other things because you get a real clear picture now on who you are through your values.
That sounds like a really great starting point for self-awareness.
Mm-hmm.
I've heard different renditions of the exercise that you've just shared. Mm-hmm. I feel very grateful. You might know in the podcasting space, John Lee Dumas. I was at a podcasting event and happened to bump into him and he was getting a lot of attention, people around him. He's like the podcast today guy. And I had my fangirl pants on, of course. I was like, oh, and I went up to him and I said, mate, I feel like there's something in there right now. I just don't know where to start. And he said, well, just ask 30 people that kind of know you and do know you, what they think those 3 might be. And that discovery process led me to 3 values, some might call superpowers, that you changed the game of actually knowing when to say yes, when to say no, how to make certain decisions, whether to travel to this place, whether to take this opportunity, whether to date this person. Knowing those 3 was super helpful. And I like the way that you kind of, that you laid it out of just, it's like a attrition process, like which ones just fall by the wayside. Mm-hmm. So I, if you don't mind, just, and I want to respect your time, of course. I've got my 3, and these have been my 3.
I want to know them so bad. I've been holding space for you to say what you want to say. I want to know them so bad.
These are right. It'd be my honor. So these 3 have been with me for a long time. Number 1, connection. I consider that to be my superpower. Like that's the thing. If I can find connection in what I do, it doesn't matter the job. It doesn't matter the position. Like it's just a vessel to connect. I'm in. Number 2 is expression. To be able to freely express. For me, that comes with expressing truth. For me, that is expressing vulnerability. It's expressing, fitness falls into that. Because for me, how can I express love is to show love for myself and take care of my body. And 3 is experience. To be able to experience all that I can in this short time that I'm going to be here on this planet in this body. So connection, expression, experience. I feel like I scratch that in a lot of ways, but I'm not always aware of these through the day to day. In fact, I can forget them sometimes, and it causes me to not be aware of just how great things are going. They may not be going at the pace that I want them to be going at, but they're really falling into place. So yeah, when you hear those 3 and you hear my kind of explanation of how I came to them, how I've used them, what comes to you? Like, I'm curious of what questions follow up with that might help unpack this.
Wow. Okay, we're going to go there. Okay, so I'm gonna be respectful of the space that, this is Mankind Project. So you're going to try and be as truthful and as open as possible. So pardon me if I probe on things that I'm functioning like a coaching call right now. So
Sure.
in your past, is there a history of depression?
Yes.
Yep. Cool. And so from there, understanding, and so I'll probably put a pin in that for now, just because of the safety of kind of the safe container of the space. There are thousands of people listening in, but that gives you an idea of how easy it is to identify from your values. So connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's an amazing book on mental health awareness called Lost Connections, right? Connections to each other, connections to nature. Like my PhD was on vertical gardens on high-rise buildings. I was just trying to bring more green into the city, trying to connect people back to nature, because I realized the more green we have around, the less depressed we are, right? And then the opposite of depression is expression, right? So it's no surprise that this became your value, right? And this goes back to what I said before. Our biggest challenges form our biggest gifts, right? So getting in touch with your story, it's like, this was my story. I went through a real challenge with depression. It's not easy, right? And, being Mankind Project, there's a whole conversation around to have like why we don't have rites of passages anymore. That's a whole nother tangent, right? But that leads to some of these identity crises that we have because we're still carrying around these Peter Pan complexes into the future, right? Yeah. So you've had this challenge with, okay, connection is come through as a value. You prioritize it as a priority because you know what connection doesn't feel like. Right? Lost connections to nature. I know you wig out on nature heaps, and connection to others, right? And I know you wig out on connection to others as well. It's the same as me. And this is why there's such great rapport here today, right? Because we both value connection as number one, right?
Sure.
Then expression, number two, is like you going against ever having to feel like, okay, I don't ever want to be pushed in and depressed from expressing, because then that's literally the antidote to that depression or that trauma that you experienced, right? Through whatever the depression was, right? And then the experience is like, okay, cool, like actually having experiences that are positive as opposed to some of the challenges you've had. So from there, then from that place, like that's what your values initially jump out at me as. From there, we start going on conversations. It's like, okay, cool, what was the biggest challenge that caused you your depression? You don't have to answer that here today. But, from there we start understanding, okay, cool, this is what the story arc of your life was. What was the thing that came to you that healed you through your depression? For me, it was meditation, mindfulness, right? For you, it may have been, was there something that emerged for you through that process?
Yeah, it was emotional expression. It was getting out of the kind of box of manhood of what was expected to be a man. Don't cry, make money, be tough, right? Be the alpha. Not to assert that I ever was an alpha, quote unquote, but I remember the immediate moments just within the hour of nearly driving my car into a tree was the 20 minutes of just crying and soaking my bed. I've never cried like that prior, and I've never cried like that since. It was like the lid came off. And that was my first experience of real emotional expression from a place of not someone took my toy or my ball. It was from a place of, I have a choice right now. Do I knock on that door and say, cool, Brandon Cliff made it to 92 to 2016. See you later. No, It was that there's more to be done here. And so finding a men's group, fortunately, it happened to be one of those serendipitous moments that literally as I am wiping the tears off my face, I get a text message from a mate. And being the true Aussie, he's like, "Oi, dickhead, I'm at this men's group. You should come and join me."
Yeah, actually, just for those tuning in, I don't believe in coincidence. So there's a reason that it happened.
Well, mate, you tell you what, in the years since, I've missed maybe 10 men's circles, weekly men's circles since then, because I knew that was a place where I could go and freely and safely express my emotions. And I haven't seen it framed this way, to look at.
So the key punchline, sorry to cut you off, brother.
No,
the key thing that's helping you, like, do you see how that was the antidote to that state?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, now.
That was your biggest challenge, and this is the biggest gift. And lo and behold, here we are on the Mankind Project podcast, right? Yeah. And you're facilitating this work. Why? Because your biggest challenge forms your biggest gift. And so, ergo, here we are once again, right? You fulfilling that kind of hero's journey. It's like, you went away, found that sword from the bottom of the hill, and here you are now wielding it and helping others on that journey.
Mate, too cool. Too cool. Isn't it interesting? I have a mentor who reminds me all the time when I'm getting overwhelmed. He says, he goes, mate, look at the mountains you've climbed. And then you'll realize that the mountain you're looking at is actually a molehill. And looking back at those mountains that were climbed, I mean, that wasn't 20 minutes of crying wasn't the solution to that. It was a lot of work, a ton of unpacking, and
years of work.
It'll never end. But the cool thing is, just from this conversation alone, I get to walk away with another awareness piece of, depression, expression. Interesting that. You know, there's a yin and yang to it that I think is really, really cool. Mate, look, this could, I know we could carry this conversation on forever. I want to respect your time. So I want to ask you a question. What do you want for, like, what is your wish for the next generation that's coming up?
This is easy.
Sounds like you got the answer. Go for it.
Yeah, I pray a lot, man. I pray a lot. Touch wood. And yeah, pray for the earth, pray for the waterways. Pray that within our lifetime, starvation becomes a thing of the past. There is a third of the planet throws out its food and a third of the planet goes hungry. Like, what the fuck? Like, we have technology to iron this out. But anyway, in response to that question, the prayer I find myself consistently putting up there is that may, as a species, touch wood, may our wisdom forever outstrip our knowledge.
Wisdom outstrip the knowledge.
Because we're growing a lot with technology, with education, you know, even artificial intelligence. Some people are asking us to put the pin in it. Some are saying don't. You know, gene splicing, there is so much knowledge available to us. But I think wisdom gives us the light in which to best wield that knowledge. And at the moment, I think, it's just a prayer that I keep praying for, is that I hope our wisdom consistently outstrip our knowledge so that we use the knowledge that we have for the greatest good of all.
Fantastic, man. How can we support you in your mission right now? And how can we follow your journey?
Super easy. Please go along to the Inspired Evolution on YouTube. Hit subscribe, man. I love the YouTube page for the Inspired Evolution. It's only been recently that we've started realizing just how awesome YouTube is. People will watch a video and then they'll comment along at the bottom. And then from there, I can engage with you and we can have really deep and meaningful conversations around some of the content, not too dissimilar to what's going on here today. So that's kind of my favorite. It costs you nothing. It's super straightforward, super easy. And we can stay in touch. So that's kind of my favorite thing. And yeah, stay in touch via YouTube. We're obviously on Facebook. We're on Insta. We're in all those places. If you want to reach out to me personally, Facebook, send me a personal message. I have a lot of inbound mail, but at the moment I still do get back to everybody, but don't expect a response within like a week. Like, I'll take my time, but I will get there. But yeah, that's the best way to get in touch with me personally. But yeah, the YouTube page is probably the best place to stay connected to everything Inspired Evolution oriented.
Fantastic. Well, we are live, so I just posted that in the comments for those of you that are spending time with us this evening.
Thank you, brother.
Mate, thank you for taking the time. Thank you for helping us get a better understanding of the loaded thing that is purpose, the thing that can almost be so elusive for many of us in life. I feel a little bit closer to it now, having had this conversation and spent this time with you. I hope those of you that are listening at home, that are listening live, that are listening a year from now, hope you guys are able to walk away with a little bit of a deeper understanding yourself. Thank you guys again for joining us. Thank you for checking in throughout this episode, and we will see you next week. Before you take off, I have a little bonus for you. At the end of our live broadcast, we kept recording the end of our time together, Amrit and I, and I had to ask him, like, what was it like to be mentored for 6 months by the man himself, the author of The Power of Now, A New Earth, Eckhart Tolle? What was that like? And what followed was a hilarious conversation. So if you yourself have been wondering what it would be like to work with a guy like Eckhart Tolle, then I think you'll enjoy this little clip before we wrap things up for today's podcast. Enjoy.
Listen or read it a couple times to let it sink in.
More than a couple, mate.
Cool, but 6 months of working with him personally, I mean, to be in his presence would have been amazing. But there's got to be a moment here and there that you were like,
Dude.
Your voice is putting me to sleep.
Oh, no, it's harder asking questions. Like, it's harder asking because you just ask questions, and instead of him answering your questions, like, who's asking? And you're like, what do you mean? Like, I asked you a question. It's like, who's asking? And then he's in turn asking you a question to realize that the part of you that's asking the question is the part that doesn't know. And there's a part of you that does know. And for that part to shut the fuck up.
Right.
And
is
it's
it
just
from your
like,
head, your heart, your gut, your cost?
but I really want to know. My ego wants to know. And it's just like, and it's just like, oh, man. It was like, dude, it was tough at times. And, but it was really interesting because he was coaching me to be a teacher on presence and purpose. And it was fascinating because I see him as the presence guy, but to get like his perspectives on purpose was like, because today, even you're like, how do we activate our purpose? And it's just like, he's just like, it just is.
Mm-hmm.
Just is. Just is. And I'm like, what do you mean it just is? Like, people want to know like how to uncover, like unblock their bullshit, like pull back the layers. And he's like, even that yearning means they're doing it. And I'm like, I get it, but people really want someone there to kind of roll their sleeves up. And he's just like, no, it just is. And I'm like, I can't just sit there and tell people it just is because I'm not Eckhart Tolle.
Yeah.
I don't carry around that context.
No, you're asking them to trust. Like, you're asking them to trust that alone and say, look, I'm not going to give you a 12-point plan. I'm going to ask you to trust me and understand that, you're already on the path. And yeah, gosh, I mean, I remember when I downloaded his audio book, I was in it for 5 minutes and I went, I'm reading it. and I literally read it with the voice of Gilbert Gottfried, the parrot from Aladdin. Literally, like, when you find yourself sitting there, questioning life's like, that's literally how I had to do it. That way, I couldn't have done it any other way.
That is so good. Yeah, nice.
This has been the Mankind Podcast, produced in association with the Mankind Project USA. I have been your host, Brandon Clift, and I personally want to thank our guests for joining us today and imparting their wisdom from their experiences in this amazing journey called life. And of course, I want to thank you, the listener, because through your attention and your support, you make it a heck of a lot easier for us to let men out there in the world know that they are not alone and that there is more than one way to be a man. Special thanks, of course, goes to my incredible team, Marketing and Communications Director Boyson Hodson, producer and editor of this episode, Michael Russo, who makes me sound so much more intelligent than I actually am, so of course, special kudos goes there. And if you've been enjoying the music throughout this episode and all of our episodes, check out Jim, Donovan, and the Sun King Warriors. I have links to them in the show notes. Now, the fee for this episode is simple. If you found gold and insights that you believe could benefit your loved ones and those you care about, be sure to share it with them. And of course, remember that life doesn't happen to us, it happens for us, so long as we rip the pen out of fate's hand and become the author of our own story. So my friend, pick up the pen and we'll see you next week. Lots of love.